Greetings. It's a great pleasure to have all of you on this occasion. We have, as MGM University, have been striving to bring holistic knowledge to the young generation. Whether they are engineering students or management students, pure science, applied science students, or students of performing arts, we want them to have a comprehensive understanding of the subject so that they are not bound to the schools of thoughts, but to the knowledge of life. For that purpose, we think that philosophy should be introduced to all the students of all the as such, we all know philosophy is the foundation of all knowledge. It is the foundation of all sciences, all streams of disciplines of studies. And that kind of orientation to philosophy alone will make students look at life holistically, not in a compartment way. As part of this effort, we have, through our Department of Philosophy, have introduced this webinar series so that our young generation can understand philosophy and its significance in their respective discipline and in their life in general and get benefited. I'm very glad that we have our eminent professor to speak on this occasion on the most revered philosopher of the world, Socrates, as a martyr of reason. And we all look forward to listen to him. And I request our participants to come after the presentation with their queries and suggestions or comments or their observations so that this session will be lively, engaging, and also participatory. I look forward to listen to the eminent professor. Looking forward.
Thank you, Dr. John, sir, for your kind words. Now, I would like to call upon Dr. Manjushree Lange, Assistant Professor of Women and Gender Studies at MGM University, to introduce today's distinguished speaker. Dr. Lange.
Thank you so much for yes, sir. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It is a great pleasure that I introduce our esteemed speaker for the second session of the Philosopher's Word webinar series, Dr. Sahebrao G. Nigal, a retired but not tired philosopher. Dr. Nigal continues to be an influential figure in the field of philosophy, currently serving as a senior visiting faculty in the Department of Philosophy at Mumbai University. He inspires students and contributes significantly to academic discourse with over 40 years of dedication to philosophical education. Dr. Nigal has left an indelible mark, particularly during his notable tenure at Tatvagnan Vidyapit in Thane. Dr. Nigal earned his MA in philosophy in 1972 and his doctorate of philosophy in 1982 from Mumbai University, with a thesis titled Axiological Approach to the Vedas with special reference to the concept of Purushartha. His academic expertise span Indian ethics, Vedanta, axiology, existentialism, and philosophy of science, reflecting a profound understanding of both Indian and Western philosophical traditions. Throughout his extensive teaching career at Tatvagnan Vidyapit, Dr. Nigal has shaped the philosophical foundation of the countless students, focusing on Indian philosophical traditions. He has also held key positions, including lecturer and reader at BNN College, B1D, and head of the Department of Philosophy at the same institution. Moreover, he has served as an adjunct reader in Vallav Vedanta and Vaishnavism at Mumbai University. In recognition of his distinguished contributions to education and philosophy, Dr. Nigal received the prestigious Pracharya Shivaji Rao in 2013 from the Maharashtra Tattvagnan Parishad at JSSP College, Govali, Thane. Dr. Nigal is prolific author with notable works including Exological Approach to the Vedas, Tattva Chintan, Greek Tattva Chintan, Indian Conception of Values, Parivartan, and Introduction to the Philosophy of Religion. He has published numerous articles covering topics such as Vedic values, karma theory, science and spirituality, and ecological issues in Western traditions. Dr. Nigal is a life member of various philosophical societies, including the Bombay Philosophical Society, Maharashtra Tattvagnan Parishad, and the Indian Philosophy Congress. He has also guided several PhD and MPhil students, demonstrating his commitment to nurturing the next generation of philosophers. His research interests encompass Indian and Western philosophy, existentialism, yoga philosophy, Greek philosophy, value education, and so on. In today's session titled Socrates, a Martyr of Reason, Dr. Nigal will delve into the life, ideas, and enduring legacy of Socrates, highlighting the philosopher's unwavering commitment to reason and truth, even at the cost of his life with decades of teaching and research experience. Dr. Nigal's profound insights will surely enrich our understanding of this great thinker. On behalf of all participants and faculty, we welcome you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lange, for the wonderful introduction. Now, without further ado, it is my privilege to invite our speaker, Dr. Sahebrao Nigal, Senior Visiting Faculty at the University of Mumbai, and my guide, my teacher, to take us through the life and philosophy of Socrates. Dr. Nigal, the floor is yours.
So thank you, madam, for your kind words. Also, at the outset, thank Dr. R.K., Chairman of today's session, and Dr. John and Dr. Rameshwar Kanse for inviting me to speak on this. Friends, philosophy 200 years back was supposed to be a kind of outdated subject, a kind of dead subject, because of the advance of scientific developments in Europe. They thought that now philosophy will not exist in future. But you will find after that criticism, new philosophies came into existence. For example, philosophy of science, philosophy of mathematics, philosophy of religion, and so on and so forth. Today we are going to, so Socrates belongs to the 5th century before Christ. That means 2,500 years back, this great man flourished in the city of Athens. And the surprising thing is, he has not written a single book on philosophy. And still, some 15 years back, UNESCO has declared International Philosophy Day in the name of Socrates. The birthday of Socrates is supposed to be the International Philosophy Day. This is very surprising that the man who has not written any text as such, any book, not deliver any lecture on philosophy. This is again very surprising. And still, Socrates is going to be remembered as a great philosopher, not only of the West, of the East also. Why? And because the title of today's lecture shows that he was the first martyr of reason. Martyr of reason, the man who died for the sake of rationalism, for the sake of reason, for the sake of, we may say, the specific organ that belongs to human beings, and that is intellect, reason. And he always insisted on using reason to arrive at definite conclusions. But he himself has not given any positive philosophy as such. And of course, we can derive philosophical principles from the life and mission of Socrates. This man belongs, as I told you, to the 5th century before Christ. That means in those days, so far as Greece was concerned, it was not a one unified country. There were Greek city-states. Among them, for example, was Athens was one of the city-states, just as we have now Delhi as a city-state in India. Similarly, in those days, there were city-states. We may nowadays can call them that they were different Greek colonies. Call them by any name you like, but Greece was not a kind of unified country as such. But we must go back and try to understand the life and mission of Socrates in the context of his times, because nobody is free from the influence of time. Time is a great healer. Similarly, diabetes is a great, we may say, a great aspect of human existence, which must be taken into consideration when we are discussing, for example, the lives of great men like Socrates. Now, during those days, if you go back to pre-Socratic philosophy, that is 6th century before Christ, you will find that majority of them were discussing, we may say, cosmological problems regarding the origin of the universe, whether it is one or there are two realities or there are more than two realities underlying this universe, whether the universe was created by God or was not created by God, and so on. So mainly nature was in the focus of majority of the philosophers prior to, we may say, Socrates. But during the period of Socrates, there was the school of sophists. Sophia means knowledge. Sophia means wisdom. There is Sophia College in Mumbai. Sophia means wisdom. So there were sophists. And what were these? Who were these sophists? The sophists were, we may say, nowadays we have so many classes, private classes in all cities. And nowadays their classes, this is spreading in villages also. So they were, we may say, the public educators as such. But what were they educating or communicating to the people at large, especially the youngsters? The practical wisdom. They were more prudentialists than moralists. Prudentialism, mainly concerned with practical success and failure. And in those days, since politics was a very powerful instrument of, we may say, emerging as practical heroes, we may call them, that practical knowledge, that is getting success in politics, became a very, we may say, urgent need so far as the youngsters were concerned. This was the phenomenon in Athens also. And the sophists, so the word sophist, as I told you, Sophia means knowledge. The sophists were men of knowledge. So there is nothing wrong in this. But they became public educators. There is nothing wrong in this also. But they became, we may say, public educators in regard to practical success or failure in your political life, in your social life. And for this, they charges heavy fees. So, because of, we may say, getting success in this, they would develop a kind of, we may say, linguistic studies. They develop logic also, because that is very important, or we may say refuting or rebutting the views of others and getting success, especially because there was, in Athens, there was a direct democracy. Direct democracy means the senior citizens or the citizens who were supposed to be senior or sub-educated, they would participate in these democratic debates and would come to the conclusion, especially on certain occasions, such as whether we should go in or war or not. Because in those days this happened, even today this is happening. What is happening in today's world? We talk about peace, but there are so many conflicts. There is Lebanon, Israel, and this Hezbollah, and so on. Such conflicts in those days were there, and the so-called others attacked. And the best example is Alexander the Great. When Alexander the Great later on attacked Athens, and he was who was supposed to be responsible for this? Aristotle was supposed to be responsible for this, because for at least 1 year, Aristotle was a tutor of Alexander the Great. So this shows that in such situations, what should we do? Should we go in for treaty, or should we start the war, wage the war against the enemies, and so on? And in this, there will be debates. And who will succeed in this? A good speaker, good debater will generally win the, we may say, this debate, and the decision will be taken in favor of war, or in favor of peace, or in favor of treaty, and so on. So this is how sophists were pragmatic teachers who tried to earn wealth and taught the people, we may say, practically useful rules. Practically useful. They may be ethically neutral also. I will give you one example of, say, for example, there is the reference to Thrasymachus in Plato's Republic. Thrasymachus was a sophist, and he said, what is justice? Justice is to subserve the interest of the privileged people, or the rich, or those who are in power. There is no place for common man in this. So this is how Thrasymachus will say, this is justice. So if some powerful man is very unjust, is tyrannical, and is unjust towards the people at large, then the majority of the people will be wrong according to this principle, and the man who is in power or who is strong will rule the roost. So this is how sophists, we may say, they were to some extent skeptics also, because they challenged the conventional wisdom, but they did not give positive wisdom. They tried to create, we may say, a kind of atmosphere where good and bad, true and false, these are all, we may say, useless words so far as the concept of justice and the concept of mercy, or concept of forgiveness, or concept of right and wrong are concerned. Ultimately, who will win this? Those who are in power, those who are powerful. So this gradually resulted in might is right type of philosophy. The law of the jungle. The law of the jungle. In the law of the jungle, if the lion, hungry lion, attacks the rabbit has no right to complain, because he is hungry and he is powerful enough to kill the rabbit. And if the rabbit says, what have I done? There is no question of what have you done or what have you not done. I am hungry and powerful, I can catch you, I can eat you. This is known as the might is right philosophy, or the law of the jungle. And because of this, during that period, the distinction between right and wrong, the distinction between true and false, we may say, started disappearing. The result was intellectual anarchy and ethical anarchy. To some extent, intellectual anarchy may not create problems, because who bothers about all these things, intellectual things. But ethical anarchy is dangerous, both for the individual's existence and for the existence of the group or society. During this period, Socrates was born. And Socrates was born in a poor family of stone cutters, family of stone carvers. Stone cutters family means his whole background is very, very backward. Economically very poor, and intellectual also, we may say he belongs to the backward class. But Socrates was such a type of man that he accepted a kind of, we may say, a kind of profession, not in the sense in which now we are professional philosophers or professional doctors or professional politicians and so on. It is a kind of, we may call it vocation. There is a difference between profession, vocation, and occupation. So he was the man who was interested in, we may say, intellect and educating the people in using their reason objectively. So what is the difference between humans and non-human animals? Human animals, we are also animals. There are other animals, human animals and non-human animals. What's the distinction between the two? One of the main distinction is reason, intellect, and one of the main functions of reason is to distinguish between right and wrong, duty and non-duty, good and bad, auspicious and inauspicious. So this is how he said, one of the most important thing of the Greeks is they were not under the influence of any religious holy book. In those days, there was no Christianity. There are three Semitic religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. There was only Judaism, but the Greeks were not Jews. There was no Christianity. There is no question of being Christian. There was no Islam also. So among these three main Semitic religions, there was only one religion, and that was Judaism. But the Greeks were not under the influence of any Old Testament or any holy book. They insisted on using the specifically human faculty, and that is reason. We also use reason. In Hindi, we may call us, majority of us, especially those who are, we may say, working in factories, working in offices, as we may say, those who live on their reason, those who live on their wits. In Hindi, Marathi, we call them buddhijivi. They are using their reason for the sake of, we may say, getting benefits, economic benefits, political benefits. For the sake of this, we may do all sorts of things which are, we may say, according to our own reason. So this is buddhijivi people. Socrates was not interested in this. He was trying to teach the youngsters what is intellectual honesty, what we call buddhinist people. We are also using reason for the sake of arguments in favor of view X or in favor of view not X. So this we call it a kind of argument, using reason for the sake of argumentative this victory of our views and defeat of the views of others and so on. But Socrates was not interested in both these functions of reason. He was interested in intellectual honesty. And therefore, we have the title of today's lecture is Martyr of Reason, the man who insisted on using reason for arriving at conclusions and trying to be honest to those conclusions. This is very important. We have given up this type of honesty. Arrive at the conclusions by using your own reason. Not because majority of the people do this and do that, or not because the tradition is in favor of X, Y, Z. So most of the people are guided by customary morality, that is tradition, or they are guided by what majority of the people do, what others do. We also do the same thing. So Socrates was not interested in this. Socrates said, you can use your reason and arrive at conclusions, but once you arrive at those conclusions, you must remain loyal to them. That is very important. And this can be seen in the life of Socrates himself. So he was a man who taught people to use their reason. How did he do this? See, even today, when we go to the marketplace, or you are in the bus, or in a public place, square or a plaza, people go on discussing political things, go on thinking, go on discussing, we may say, what the prime minister has done or what the rulers have done, what they are doing, and so on. But they don't go to the roots of all these problems. They discuss all these things, and some of them are baseless also, because nobody is serious to go to the root and to find out as far as possible, the correct answer of this. Suppose somebody says democracy is good, somebody else will say dictatorship is still better, and so on. So this goes on, and this is, we may say, the human habit of discussing all these things when we are coming together on certain public occasions or in public places, in temples, in Saudis, and so many other public places where we gather. But nobody goes to the roots, and somebody takes these discussions seriously and try to speak and try to give answers. Socrates would go there, would listen to what is going on, and would ask the question, what we call Dudacharyas. Dudacharya, the man who claims that he knows. In our language, we may call them Dudacharyas. Such Dudacharyas are there everywhere. And Socrates would go on asking questions to him. And finally, the speaker will be nonplussed. The speaker will have no answer. The youngsters thought that Socrates might be knowing the answer. This was his daily practice. He will go to the marketplace. We also go to the marketplace to purchase vegetables, to certain other items, and so on. But Socrates would go to the marketplace. He had nothing to sell. He had nothing to purchase also. He belonged to the poor family economically. But this was his mission. Mission of, we may say, inspiring the youngsters to use their reason, to use their intellect, and try to remain loyal to the conclusions which they have arrived at by using their reason honestly. This was the Socrates' mission. But because of this, many people became his enemies because they were defeated in, we may say, that group. If X, Y, Z are sitting together and there is X is giving the answers, and Socrates comes and refutes all the answers given by X, then naturally X will feel that Socrates is his enemy. But that was not business. When he was asked, why are you doing all these things? He said, we are together seeking knowledge. In 1985, I listened to the lecture. I was present in the lecture, and the lecture was given by Jiddu Krishnamurti. And Jiddu Krishnamurti, during his lecture, 1 hour lecture, at least twice or thrice, I listened to two of his lectures. He would say, you are listening to me? That is wrong. We are exploring together. That was his, we may say, his approach. Twice or thrice during his lecture, he would say, we are exploring together. That means J. Krishnamurti was not speaking as a guru or as an authority on the concept of mind or concept of desire or concept of wish or concept of peace or concept of happiness. So all these concepts, we may say, are concepts with which we are, at least so far as common sense is concerned, familiar. But he would say that in listening to me, you are accepting me as an authority, which I'm not supposed to, we may say, supposed to be an authority. We human beings are exploring together. That means you have to be very attentive. And he would discuss such topics, ego, desire, thought, such topics with which we are supposed to be very acquainted, with which we are supposed to be expert in using these terms and so on. So Similarly, here Socrates would not give the answers, and those who were defeated in such conversations, in such dialogues, became enemies of Socrates. And the politicians were also afraid of Socrates because Socrates was, though he belongs to the ordinary family, he had participated in the war. He was once upon a soldier also. Now, since I am reminded of the concept of soldier, I would like to invite your attention that you belong. It will be consistent with MGM University. It is in the name of Mahatma Gandhi. And when he came back to India from London, within 1 year or two, he went to South Africa. And in South Africa, there was one journal which was published. It was bilingual. It was published in English and Gujarati or Hindi, whatever it may be, Hindi or Gujarati. It may be Gujarati or Hindi because majority of the people would understand Gujarati also. And he was asked to edit the journal. And in 1895, he was, we may say, the editor of the journal. He wrote 5 articles on Socrates titled The Soldier of Truth. See, Gandhi is associated with 2 basic concepts, truth and non-violence. And truth, he gave the title to his articles, The Soldier of Truth. Soldier of Truth. Soldier, why this title is given? Because the soldier does not bother about the consequences of his actions. He is not interested in benefiting from the actions. Soldier is asked to do or die, that's all. Do or die. So his main function his main task is to do, not to bother about the consequences, whether he wins or he will get the award or he will get the Arjun Chakra, this or that. He doesn't bother about all these things. That is soldiers, we may say, philosophy, we may call it. So soldier of truth. Socrates died for the sake of this. So politicians, selfish politicians, some of the traditionalists and some other Buddhacharyas came together and decided that Socrates is a dangerous fellow because he became a hero of the youngsters. In all this discussion, he would refute, we may say, whoever were the speakers, who tried to give answers to we may say, to those who asked the questions and so on. So some of the people thought that Socrates must be a man of knowledge because those who claim that they are men of knowledge, they are refuted or their arguments are rebutted by Socrates. He must be the knower. Or some of them might have incited the youngsters that you ask him to give a lecture on all these things. Socrates says, really speaking, we are just as Jacob said, exploring together. He used to say, we are exploring together. We are seeking truths, and truth can be discussed, we may say, thoroughly, and each one can arrive at the conclusion, and which will be acceptable to all of us, which will be based on sound evidence. So it is begin with so he insisted on defining the terms. And somebody will come forward and give his exposition. Then Socrates will raise questions. And gradually, the fellow will be nonplussed. That was his method. It is known as Socratic irony. The man who claimed that he does not know was the man who refuted, we may say, the arguments of those who try to claim that they know. So one day what happened? The youngsters went to the Oracle of Delphi. Oracle of Delphi, there was one temple, and the Oracle of Delphi, because in such temples there are people who are very clever from the practical point of view. Most of them are priests. If you go to them with some question, they will answer a question in such a way that it can be interpreted in two ways. For example, some people approach this oracle of different and ask the question, who should we go for the war? He said, all right, you may go for the war. But in the war, they were defeated. How could you say this? He said, I have not said that you will be successful and the enemy will be unsuccessful or will be defeated. I simply said that, yes, somebody will win. I have not said anything. Similarly, the youngsters approached the oracle of Delphi and asked the oracle, who is the wisest man in Athens? And the oracle, that selfish fellow, the clever fellow, asked them, what do you think? Youngsters innocently said, we think that Socrates might be the wisest man in Athens. Yes, you are right. Socrates is the wisest man in Athens. The whole group of youngsters proceeded towards the house of Socrates and said, oracle says this. It was the traditional to approach the oracle to get answers. Can oracle be wrong? Socrates was not so much confused. Socrates says, oracle is right. Oracle says, Socrates is the wisest man in Athens. What is the meaning of this? I am definitely wise in the sense that I know that I do not know. Your seeking of knowledge, we seeking of wisdom must begin with this knowledge of ignorance. You must first know that you do not know this. Then and then you can sincerely get involved in the pursuit of seeking knowledge. This is how they were told by Socrates that he is wise because he knows that he is not wise. He is man of wisdom because he knows that he is not a man of wisdom. That means ignorance and acceptance of honestly accepting ignorance is the beginning of knowledge. It is the source of, we may say, therefore, the great disciple of Socrates was Plato. And Plato said, philosophy is a child of wonder. Philosophy is a child of inquisitiveness. Philosophy is a child of curiosity, jidnyasa. What is important is jidnyasa. So there must be jidnyasa among the listeners of this lecture so that they will be able to gain something. Or even if they don't get anything, they will be aware of this. Or they will get the questions also. And don't be afraid of questions. Questions are opportunities. Problems are opportunities for us. So this is how Socrates tried to convince the youngsters that he was a man who honestly accepted that he was ignorant, though some of them were not satisfied with this. But unfortunately, some of the politicians, some of the traditionalists, and some of those who claimed that they were knowers, they went against him, and there was a trial. And that was public trial. And 2 charges were leveled against him, against Socrates, that he is inventing new gods, which he never did. See? And second thing is, he is spoiling the youth. He was not trying to influence the youth and make them his followers. He never tried to invent new gods also. He simply said that one has to listen to the inner voice, or what we nowadays call conscience. But this conscience must be, the verdict of the conscience must be rationally justifiable, rationally communicable to others so that they will also accept it. But he was not interested in all these things. He was interested in exciting the people, educating the people, inspiring the people in using their reason, especially in regard to what is right and wrong, what is good or bad, what is true or false. That means these are life-related questions. Nowadays we talk about the standard of living. There are 2 things, standard of living and standard of life. You don't bother about the standard of life of the man. But what about his standard of living? Two persons living in a flat whose area is around, say, 1,000 square feet, highly furnished and so on. Everything is available there so far as technology is concerned. This is Socrates. He said, sorry, this is standard of living. But what is the standard of life? They are not on good terms. She is fighting with him and he is fighting with her. What type of life is this? So standard of life and standard of living. So these questions are related to the standard of life. What kind of life you are living in a huge bungalow, in a huge fort, in a huge house, highly furnished house, and so on. And there was a debate, public debate in the, we may call this a kind of parliament, public parliament, and some votes went against Socrates, and he was, we may say, condemned to death. Socrates was asked to respond to this, and Socrates said, I have not committed any crime, I have not committed any sin, but I accept the verdict of the people because that was a part of, we may say, the democratic life. That was the part of democracy in Athens. So he accepted the verdict, but he would never accepted that he had committed any crime. There were his friends, men like Plato and others, they tried to, we may say, release Socrates, work for the release of Socrates. Socrates refused all these things. He was asked to exile, go away from Athens. He refused to do this. In accepting any verdict in favor of his, we may say, freedom from, we may say, that death penalty, he said, I will have to accept that I have committed the crime, which I have not. You may do anything you like, but I have not committed any crime, therefore I won't accept any method of escaping from punishment. And that was death punishment. So the man who died for the sake of his thoughts, for the sake of philosophy, for the sake of his mission, with a smile on his face. So death of Socrates is very inspiring. And in the death of Socrates, we got, we may say, a great philosopher like Plato. Plato was the first man in the history of the world who said, unless philosophers become rulers or rulers become genuine philosophers, there will be no creation of ideal society or ideal state. So the word republic, one of the dialogues, means one of the books which belongs to Plato, is even today studied in majority of the universities in the world, which was written in 2,400 years back. So the important point is he became a great system builder. And Plato was very much upset with the death of Socrates, that people, he is not insisting on, he is not condemning anyone, he is not rejecting tradition, he is not interested in political power, he is not opposed to anyone as such, he has no personal enemies as such. Why he is killed? He is simply asking the people to use their reason, asking them to be rationalist. So here was a man who died, happily died with a smile on his face for the sake of reason. And therefore we later on see Plato and his disciple Aristotle, great system builders. Even today, their books are studied in the universities. And later on, Aristotle was accepted as one of the church philosophers by Christian theologians so that they could build Christian dogmatic theology with the help of, we may say, Aristotelian logic. And this is how he died, for the sake of reason, for the sake of philosophy, we may say. Now, what can we learn from this? There are 2 or 3 statements which are very important, though he did not give a kind of positive philosophy as such. One of them is, unexamined life is not worth living. Unexamined life is not worth living. What is the meaning of this? Nowadays, we are asked, we must habitually go to the doctor and check our health. He's not talking about this physical health. He's not talking about the body. He's not talking about checking of the blood or taking of urine and all sorts of things. He's talking about the assumptions of our life, underlying our life. See, every man has his own assumptions, which he dogmatically receives from society or from experience or from encounters with his friends and others. Suppose somebody daily goes to, in Mumbai, for example, from Kalyan to Mumbai, there is an assumption, because I want to earn wealth. Unless there is wealth, how can I survive? That is one thing. Unless there is wealth, how can I be happy? Now, this is an assumption that wealth will make you happy. Right or wrong, we have to check this. Identify the assumptions underlying your life and examine them rationally. And you will come to it. For example, somebody says, "Sabse bada rupiya." If this is your philosophy, you have to examine it. And when you examine this, you will realize, oh, this is not everything. We know this from the story of one of the kings, that he got the blessings, and he said that if you touch anything, it will become gold. So he touched a glass of water, it became gold. Then he touched his daughter, it became gold. Will it be comprehensively satisfying the man who is getting gold only? If everywhere there is gold, what will you do? You are not actually interested in this. So money has a place in our life, gold has a place in our life, but that is not everything. In philosophical terms, it is called instrumental value. It is only an instrument. Just as now we have the instrument, say I'm speaking to you with the help of this mobile. So this is an instrument. We are not supposed to exist for the sake of mobile. Mobile is an instrument. Gold is an instrument. Money is an instrument. So this is how we realize this. Even an uneducated man realizes this, that this cannot be the main assumption of my life. So identify the assumptions underlying your life and examine them rationally with the help of course, your elders, your teachers, your friends, and so on. And you will arrive at the conclusions that money is not everything. So one of the sophists used to say, man is the measure of all things. Protagoras. His name is Protagoras. He said, man is the measure of all things. Your Mahabharatkar also says, na manushat paro dharmaha. Very clear. What is the meaning of man? When you talk about man, so you have to think about this. If I make 3 statements, man is an animal, will you agree with me or not? Man is an animal. आप भी जरा बोलो. Hello. Man is an animal. Do you agree with me or not?
Participant, please unmute yourself to interact.
They can interact. You can interact on behalf of the participants.
Biologically, man is considered as animal.
Yes, man is
a rational animal.
Right. That means man is an animal is acceptable. But if I say man is nothing but an animal, First is accepted. Second one, you have to think. Man is nothing but an animal. This nothing but a approach to man is not acceptable to us. So man is animal, but go on adding now. Man is an animal, but rational. Man is an animal, but moral entity. Man is an animal. And see, this is how we can go on adding. So this is how man is the measure of things can be misunderstood. And this is how unexamined life is not worth living. Second principle he taught was virtue is knowledge. This is very important. Knowledge can be one of the virtues. Most of them have accepted this. But he says virtue is knowledge. Knowledge is concerned with knowing, but virtue is concerned with doing. Virtue is knowledge? Yes, virtue is knowledge. What is the meaning of this? So, if we know something about Duryodhan. Duryodhan used to say, Janami dharmam nachame pravritti. Janami adharmam nachame nivritti. Katapi devena, tenapi devena rudistedena, yatha pravrittosi tatha karomi. Socrates will not agree with this. I know what is duty, but I am not inclined to do this. I know what is not duty, but I am not inclined to give up it. And somehow there is something in me that provokes me or inspires me to do. This is Duryodhan. Socrates will not agree with him. Your Janami is false. Janami knows. You don't know this. You have accepted some words from some books or from some lectures, but you have no insight into this. So virtue means here insight into virtue. If you get insight into virtue, Socrates said, you cannot but be virtuous. That is the special feature of the concept of or the principle of virtue is knowledge. We must get insight into it. And this must be your personal insight. It is not borrowed from this or that. Even if it is borrowed from some holy book, you must get insight into it, and then you will be able to accept the principle that you cannot but be virtuous if you get insight into virtue. If you take, for example, Gita, in 13th chapter, they have Gita has described so many virtues, and at the end of them, the author says, "Iti jnanam." That means knowledge. This is not verbal knowledge. This is not knowledge in terms of words only. One must get insight into this. Once you get insight into this, and if you know that virtue, this is X is virtue and not X is vice, that you will not adopt not X because you have insight into this. You have reflected upon this. You have gone to the root of this. Then you cannot be. This is something like Jnanan Mukti. Another important principle which was taught by him was man is manliness. It is unmanly to run away from the principles which one has accepted, though they have resulted, for example, in punishment or in a kind of trial or in a kind of death penalty. You must honestly, boldly accept these principles. It is a kind of moral courage. Man is manliness. What is the meaning of manliness? Paurush. Paurush. This is how he taught. If you run away from the principles which you are supposed to be practicing, then you are unmanly. Be manly. Be bold. Be courageous. Accept the principle. Tell the people, yes, I have arrived at these principles because of these reasons. They are based on solid evidence. Then why should you be afraid of? We may say what others say. So this is how some principles can be collected from the life of this man. When Gandhiji was asked, what do you want to say finally? What is your message? He said, my life is my message. Similarly, Socrates would say, or on behalf of Socrates, I can say, Socrates would say, my life is my message. Dhanyavad. Hello.
Sir,
Bola.
here I am Sanjay Harke.
Yes, yes.
How we can compare Socrates and Charaka?
What is Charaka?
Charak, Lokayat, our philosopher answered.
Yes, yes. Lokayats were skeptics. He was not a skeptic. Second thing is, Lokayats were materialists. He was not a materialist. He simply said that use your reason, arrive at the conclusions, and stick to those conclusions at the cost of your life. You understand this?
Yeah.
Therefore, I told you that positively he has not said anything like this materialism or this. So you may call him skeptic, but he was not a skeptic. He said, we are, as I told you from the lectures of J. Krishnamurti, I was present in the lecture, we are exploring together. So he gave, in a sense, a kind of philosophical method.
He gave dialectic something method for.
But anybody who claims that he is a man of reason should practice it. And he said, I'm coming to these dialogues because I believe that if we explore together, we'll arrive at some definite conclusions. But we must have this desire to know, desire to explore, desire to accept the criticism, desire to go beyond the criticism, and so on. So what is important here is intellectual honesty. If the Charvak is intellectually honest, Socrates will accept him. Yes, you are perfectly right. But that doesn't mean that Charvak would say, Runam Krutva Grutam Pibet, which may be criticized by Socrates.
Right.
Yavat Jivet Sukam Jivet, Runam Krutva Grutam Pibet, or nowadays people will say Suram Pibet at any cost. And Bhasmi Bhutasya Deyasya Punaragaman Kuta. This is all right. This is your philosophical standpoint. Socrates may criticize it because he was not a materialist in this sense. So if there is any similarity between the two, if Socrates challenged the traditionalists, he also challenged the traditionalists, but his purpose was to get at the truth, not just for the sake of criticism or for the sake of, we may say, just blaming them. So Socrates cannot be considered as a Charvak.
Yes. And how about, Socrates arises before Christ 5th century. And
Yes.
Chanakya arises in between 3rd and 4th century. Some places Chanakya focus on individuality in front of publicly in front of politician, and same thing Socrates do, but he do publicly. What do you think?
You are talking about Chanakya.
Yeah.
So
He also asked question to that Rajniti and all. He also ask question always.
Definitely, he asked these questions. But see, as I told you, there were city-states and there was a kind of direct democracy among in most of the cities. At least in Athens, direct democracy means people will participate in the major conclusions, especially when to go on war or not to go on war. Come together, discuss, take the decision, and so on. So, to some extent, there will be similarity, but see, this Chanakya has a background of caste system. Chanakya never challenged the caste system. Socrates would have challenged this.
Okay.
Right? Chanakya was a believer in caste system, while Socrates was not a believer in caste system as such. He would have definitely questioned we may say, the bona fides of those who advocated caste system as such, especially birth-based caste system.
Yes.
Or anything else?
And do you think philosophy in current year, philosophy is somewhere suppressed by this modern, what I can say, modern knowledge or modern talks? Nobody is that much working on philosophy these days. As you have initially told, people are just like philosophy is ancient subject. But I feel like when we are talking artificial intelligence, there people are talking continuously with social media, right?
Yes, yes.
But
Right.
at the same time, when I'm comparing this era with Socrates, Socrates says wisdom, Socrates will wisdom still echo. He reminds us that while progress is essential, you must ask always questions.
Yes, yes. See, one of the most important thing is identify the assumptions underlying your pursuits
Yes.
and examine them, criticize them, arrive at the conclusions.
Right.
See, I 200 years back, see, once upon a time, philosophy was an umbrella term. Philosophy included all sorts of knowledge.
Hmm.
But from, say, 17th, 18th century, physics tried to get divorced from philosophy. And
True.
gradually, philosophy was handmaiden so far as West is concerned or India is concerned. It was handmaiden of theology. And gradually, theology also tried to separate itself from this. So some people thought that now philosophy has no future. But that philosophy has no future or philosophy is useless, these are philosophical statements, philosophers will say. You will have to examine them. So philosophy will remain at any cost. If you say, if you are against philosophy, that itself is a philosophy that can be challenged by someone else. If you express it properly. If you say, I don't believe in philosophy, the question will be asked, what do you mean by philosophy? That this philosophy will always remain. Therefore, it is a kind of, it was considered as the queen of sciences. And when the sciences were in danger in 17th century, at the end of 18th century, one philosopher tried to give support to, we may say, the development in science, and that was Immanuel Kant.
Yes.
Immanuel Kant was born in a family which was the family of these saddle makers. That means Charmakar Samaj, in our context, it will be the society of cobblers. You understand this?
Yes.
One of the greatest philosophers of the world was a cobbler. Because he may not get the opportunity, but he could get the opportunity because there was a freedom. All knowledge was supposed to be in Greek and Latin languages, and they were not languages of the people at large. So now, even today, the phrase is there. It is Greek and Latin to me. But there was this study of Greek and Latin was open to all. Whether you are a cobbler or you are this barber or you are a worker or you are a scavenger, if you have the desire to do this, then you can do it. Not only that, you could become a priest also. You can become a preacher of Christianity. That was not available in this country. And therefore I said, he would have challenged the caste system, birth-based caste system. Philosophy will always remain a kind of foundational discipline. It depends upon the people who accept or who challenge, we may say, certain assumptions with which we are supposed to be very much acquainted or which are acceptable to people at large. Suppose somebody says that wealth will make you happy. Doesn't matter. It is a philosophical statement. We must analyze it, try to understand this. Many times we assume that the wealthy people are happiest people, but that is not true. If we examine it, poor people are always unhappy. That is also not true. Socrates was a very poor man. While as I refer to Kant, who came from a very poor family of saddle makers. cobblers, but he is one of the most important eminent philosophers who wrote 3 critiques, also a critique of religion also. So the point is, philosophy will not disappear. The departments may disappear. Philosophy departments may disappear, but philosophy will never disappear. It will remain there. Because in philosophy, we raise fundamental questions. We talk about knowledge. Philosophy asks the question, what is knowledge? What are the means of knowledge? What is the guarantee that your knowledge is true knowledge? Now, this will remain.
But at the same time, if you are looking in foreign countries, philosophy department is very strong department. And as you
Right.
told, philosophy is umbrella of all sciences, and it is happening in foreign countries.
Right, perfectly right.
They are giving ideas and thought for all sciences.
Yes, yes. You are right.
That is not happening in India, but
What can we do? We see it will happen in future because since up to at least 1950, philosophy was the monopoly of the people of a particular caste.
right. That is
It was Sanskrit again. So we have no acquaintance with all these things. But later on we realize that in spite of all this, there are saints who have raised questions which are fundamentally very appropriate questions raised by, say, Kabir, say, Rohidas. We have such gems in our country also. But unfortunately, this will take shape in future.
right.
And because it was confined to Sanskrit, later on it was confined to English. Nowadays, we have come to the conclusion that philosophy must be discussed in the languages of the people. And this is how we go back to Buddha, who accepted the language of the people. When somebody asked Buddha that should I translate this into Sanskrit, he said no. We want this message to go to the people at large, that can go through the language of the people. Therefore, he adopted Pali. He was well acquainted with Sanskrit also. Mahavir acquainted Ardha Magadhi. This is how, unfortunately, because of this caste system, we have to accept this truth, historical truth, that we remain, we may say, totally allergic to philosophy, going to the roots. But this was the job which was done by saints in India from 5th century onwards.
Consider.
Huh?
Consider.
सर बोला.
आणखीन एखादं विचारू का सरांना क्वेश्चन?
हरकत नाही. डॉक्टर ठोंबरे मला वाटतं प्रश्न विचारू इच्छित आहे.
विचारू द्या.
संधी देऊया.
Hello.
Professor.
I would also like to be interact. Hello.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Hello.
हा सर विचारू का मी?
सर दुसऱ्या महायुद्धाच्या नंतर जे विनाश झाला युरोपमध्ये. हॅलो.
आवाज येतोय?
त्यानंतर फिलॉसॉफी या विषयाची गरज पडायला लागली मला असं वाटतं. कारण युरोपमधले विचारवंत ह्या गोष्टीचा विचार करायला लागलेत की अणुबॉम्बच्या निर्मितीनंतर आणि अणुबॉम्बच्या विध्वंसानंतर मानवी जीवनाला जर काही व्हॅल्यू राहायचं असेल तर आपल्याला ह्या गोष्टीकडे वळावं लागेल. आणि भारत अजून त्याच्याप्रमाणे विचार करत नाही का आपला अजून बेसिक नीडच कम्प्लीट व्हायचे राहील. आपण अजून त्या इरामध्ये शिरतोय. जसं आपण युरोपच्या पाठीमागं जाऊ अजून एक 25 वर्ष युरोप सारखी परिस्थिती निर्माण होईल, त्याच्यामुळेच कदाचित आपल्या देशात फिलॉसॉफी या सब्जेक्टची गरज निर्माण होईल आणि त्याच्यावर अधिक अभ्यास आणि विद्यापीठ स्तरावरती या विषयाची मागणी व्हायला सुरुवात होईल. अजून आपल्याला त्याची गरज वाटत नाहीये.
नाही असं खरं जसे सर्वसामान्य माणसं असतात ना, मेजॉरिटी आपले ते ह्या भानगडीत जास्त पडत नाहीत, परंतु गरज भासली नाही असं नाही. तुम्ही बघा 200 वर्षात आपल्याकडे पण तो अवेअरनेस येतोय. डोंट थिंक फ्रॉम द स्टँड पॉइंट ऑफ डिपार्टमेंट्स ऑफ फिलॉसॉफी, थिंक फ्रॉम स्टँड ऑफ हिस्ट्री. सी instead of creating history, our ancestors created Puranas. That is mysterious mumbo jumbo. Some historical fact will be there here or there, and something else will be there. Major of the Puranas, they deal with all these things. Now, from the introduction of British education, many times British education is blamed, is condemned by some of the people in this country. But with the introduction of British education, we started, we may say, our religion. This is a very important thing. Religion was supposed to be a very sacrosanct thing, not to be touched, not to be approached from the rational point of view. But we also started doing this, at least from the 19th century, second half of 19th century, 18th century, and it goes on. So many thinkers have done this. But so don't think about philosophy from the standpoint of departments. Think about this philosophy from the historical point of view. And many have raised the fundamental questions. Say Mahatma Phule has raised this. Then Lokhitavadi raised this. I think he was the first who said that we must write history. And our history is a kind of mythical mumbo jumbo associated with so many myths. History as such, history as a subject, history of ideas, and our system was such that we challenged the emergence of new ideas. This was the fact even in the West also. In the West also, the theologians used to say, all roads lead to Rome. All roads lead to Rome means if you want knowledge, you go to the Rome. That means Church of the Rome is everything. There is nothing new under the sun. Now, these two principles were challenged in 15th century. And this is how we have to challenge certain traditional ideas. And people have been challenging. Unfortunately, this process was, we may say, very rigorous process, vigorous process, up to 1947, we may say. Afterwards, we also started going back. That is, don't blame the educational system also, because except Swami Dayananda, all were products of, we may say, Western education. Vivekananda was trained in Western education. Arvind Ghosh was trained in Western education. Gandhiji was trained in Western education. You see, these are eminent names so far as modern India is concerned. So instead of blaming them, even today they say this. And they are writing, they are talking about rewriting history. But who is going to write it? Who is responsible for not writing the correct history of this country? When knowledge was the monopoly of a particular group, how can we blame the majority of the people? So during the last 50 years, new trends are emerging in the study of history also. Yes, you want to rewrite history or doesn't matter. And you must accept the responsibility of degradation of Hindu society as such, or Hinduism as such. Even the word Hindu is not attributed to Hinduism by a Hindu head. I have to accept this. But they don't bother about these things. And again, see, it will take some time, but gradually we are definitely challenging the foundations of, we may say, of our society, of our religion, of our sects, and so on. But that was never done. Now I will give you the very simple example from the philosophy point of view. In Brahma Sutra, there is, at present I don't have this the sutra, but that Vedas should not be taught to the Shudras. Right? Nobody challenged this. Shankaracharya, then Nimbarkacharya, Madhvacharya, then Ramanujacharya, Vallabhacharya, nobody challenged this. Though Ramanujacharya stood for equality, Samanta. He belongs to 11th century, 10th and 11th century, lived for 120 years. He was the first man who established a temple of Vishnu in Melkote and it was declared open to all. But each one has his own limits. And therefore, after his death again, the same thing prevails. He was the first to declare that the literature of sense is as good as Veda. Now, this is not a simple thing to say this in 11th century, that the literature of the sense, which is known as Tamil Ved nowadays, in those days he said, this is as valued as the holy Vedas in 11th century. In 13th century, Jnaneshwar said, Bhagavad Gita is the basis of the Vedas. Unfortunately, majority of them were followers of tradition and caste system, birth-based caste system. Majority of the people remained, we may say, totally ignorant of all these truths. And our Kirtankars will not speak like this. That is the trouble with this. So we must have now Kirtankars who are men of Renaissance and Reformation.
We have a question from Professor Dr. John sir. Before that, I request to all participants to open your video to take a group photograph.
Well, Dr. John.
प्रोफेसर निगल साहब, आप एक बेहतरीन प्रेजेंटेशन दिए जो फिलॉसफी के लिए नया लोग है उनके लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण रहा. एंड इन अ वेरी शॉर्ट स्पैन यू कुड ब्रिंग द होल लाइफ एंड contribution of Socrates in a manner that was useful. Man of reason, उसके ऊपर मैं कुछ आपसे